everybody. Welcome to episode 157 of Rush Roundtable. Today, we're going to be talking about Lock and Key. We have a great panel with us today. We got Paul, we got Alex, Derek, and myself, Ryder. This is a very cool song. So it's a 6 song on Hold Your Fire. One of the few from Hold Your Fire to get a music video. We got a lot of stuff about that coming up for you. And the only song in Rush's entire discography where Geddy used a 5-string bass. So very interesting song, a lot of really cool, unique stuff with it. So let's hop right in. So the song opens up with a very, very strong synth-heavy intro with some shouts in the back from Geddy saying, "I don't want to face the killer instinct, face it in you or me." So, Paul, you want to start this whole session off?
Thanks, Ryder. Yeah. Again, sticking with the theme of instinct for the album, the songs that came before it, say Open Secrets and Second Nature, talks about instinct to a varying degree, or how logic in contrast to instinct came into play in each of those. By the time we get to Prime Mover, now it's more instinct based, less logic, where it's like, this is what starts something, this is cause effect and all that. Now with Lock and Key, at least as far as how I interpret it, it's all about instinct, when instinct runs amok, when it is what has taken over. So as far as an overview, that's how I view the song.
Yeah, for sure. In the
strong synth opening, my favorite out of any synth Geddy's ever done is just this, it hits you. Now it starts. So
it's so good. Yeah. I think I said this on a previous episode. I think it was pretty sure it was Open Secrets. I'm not sure. Watch the other episodes of this album if you haven't seen them yet. But I mentioned that, one thing about instinct is that, instinct is we associate it with like very animalistic things, which, humans are animals basically. And this song really taps into that. It goes into like violence. And then eventually, as we'll see in this next verse, the primitive design. And I think it's a very interesting skew to look at instinct because, before we've seen it in the context of like, relationships, secrecy, personal stuff. This is where we start to get into like some really guttural primal urges and stuff. So there's some pretty heavy stuff in this song. Moving into the first verse, we carry a sensitive cargo below the waterline, ticking like a time bomb with a primitive design. Behind the finer feelings, the civilized veneer, the heart of a lonely hunter guards a dangerous frontier. The balance can sometimes fail. Strong emotions can tip the scale. So, Alex, what do you think about this section?
Well, I think of Neil's tendency, like even on across former albums, where he would talk about, like, say, I'm going to reach back a bit with the Trilogy of Fear, as far as the outer, the inner, or what's applied to us. And in this case, this verse, he's really looking at just stating the simple situation, just as you were laying it out just now, as far as the idea that here's a person, here's all of us. And as he says in the one section, as far as behind the finer feelings and the civilized veneer, the idea that just right away saying, hey, we have to go about life and in a society, in a civilization, being genial, I guess I'll say. Recognizing that with billions of people on a planet, we actually have to get along in some way, shape, or form. And then obviously heading down into the balance can sometimes fail. It's not an if, it's a when, and how much do these stressors wind up causing people to flip out, basically. And that's the thing I think of, as far as I know, you're in college. One psychology course I had was a course on stress, and that was basically the main thing, was looking at stressors and what is it and when is it that they do what they do. So it's ticking like a time bomb, basically. I mean, this is basically Neil saying, this is the individual, this is us, this is the situation, we can all relate.
Yeah, that's really, I mean, it's so cool thinking about it, like from this perspective. There's not a lot of, music that talks about like these kind of feelings and stuff. I really like the back half of this verse, behind the finer feelings, the civilized veneer. On top of that, just being a really unique, like, set of words that just, they sound very like phonetically unique. I think it definitely, paints that picture of there's a lot of layers behind it, behind the finer feelings, behind a civilized veneer, which is another crazy way to think about like society and stuff,
Oh yeah,
or
yeah.
as I've said a million times, humans are basically animals. The only reason we got here is because, we can talk and we have thumbs and we can like figure like computers out, but ultimately that can all go away if we like push away this idea of what a civilization is. We
Mm.
can get back to like, the dangerous frontier, and just, get to these animalistic urges. I just think it's a really interesting way to look at, human nature and everything else like that. Anybody else got anything about this section?
That music change at when the balance can sometimes fail, strong emotions can tip the scale. If you listen, it's first Getty's laying things out with the first verse, and when he gets there, you can hear the chord change and the tone change, and suddenly it's more adrenalized. There's more going on. The insistence level starts cranking up. Love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the beginning part, Lifeson's playing basically just, that arpeggio, and then at that point he turns it into more of that power chord that's walking, just stepping up the scale basically. So yeah, that offsets it to, and that, yeah, that's something we definitely don't want to forget about, is their ability to basically create a score to the movie. The lyrics are the movie, the music's the score, and it's always so well done. And that's something we definitely don't want to forget about,
Yeah,
because
for
that's
sure.
why we're here.
I'm glad you brought up how the music amps up like within the pre-chorus. It's such a driving song, because I don't know if anybody else experiences this when you listen to this song. If to me at least, and to my ear, the drum beat sounds a little wonky in the first verse until uh the line below the water line. And I don't know if it's just me how I hear it, but it's still a very steady beat, but definitely by the point of the balance can sometimes fail, it really solidifies, it's going, it feels like you're in a speeding car at that point. And then eventually, turning into the synth soundscapes, and Alex is playing that we hear in the chorus. What a transition. um so the chorus goes, don't want don't want to silence a desperate voice for a sake of security. No one wants to make a terrible choice on the price of being free. I don't want to face the killer instinct, face it in you or me, so we keep it under lock and key. Derek, what do you think about this chorus section?
So the way I feel about it is like there's certain situations that people get into, like let's say you work at a retail job and people are really making you angry, but if you give into those emotions, then you can face consequences for that. But there's other situations where you have to speak up but not be violent about it. So there's like that kind of balance that Neil touches on in many different songs, especially they go back to the Fear trilogy, talking about fear, and a verse we're going to get into later on in the song about people will kill for a fanatical cause. When we get into that later, I think it also really relates to that Fear trilogy, and just the fact that in this period of Rush, it's the late '80s, and a lot of time when people discuss this later part, people are like, oh, it's '80s, it sounds dated, but I think the one thing that isn't dated is is Neil's lyrical content. Even through like the '70s, '80s, '90s, with the exception of Virtuality, which is debatable. Many people bring that up.
I've said that.
I'd say that everything else, Neil is spot on to today, for sure.
One of the, if I could, one of the things with that, it's the first chorus hugs that first verse so well, because, as I was saying, the first verse is basically saying, hi, here's the individual, here's what the individual has to offer or has to be wary of. This first chorus speaks to it's not I want to silence, it's not they don't want to silence, it's just simply don't want to silence a desperate voice. So it's kind of making it vague, I'm sure intentionally vague, with the idea of you know, that once again, the maintaining of the balance that, you know, we have to go around in this world and we don't necessarily want to be walking around like a maniac and basically, well, suffering the consequences of. So I feel like this chorus is the individual's chorus, whereas, like, you know, Derek was just saying, getting into the next verse, we start to get into the outer. You know, it's not the internal person, it's how it starts to hit the external world more so.
That
Yeah.
individual like Tom Sawyer too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, just touching on the musicality of this chorus, I think it's really, really cool how, you know, they changed the beat of it throughout, especially like on the price of being free and the so we keep it under lock and key, which first title drop of the song. Um, I I just can't applaud Rush enough for this album. Not well, you know, not just this song, but this whole album. I feel like by, you know, Hold Your Fire and as we get into Presto later on, Rush have really solidified themselves as composers. They and I, Alex, I really love what you said about, you know, the lyrics being a movie and the music being a score, because that's really what it sounds like here. You know, we've had songs on this like Second Nature and, you know, whatever else, that have these big soundscapes, and Rush is really by this point have, you know, honed in on that. And, you know, through some of the later albums that come after this, they strip it back a little bit, you know, not as heavily reliant on synthesizers. But I feel like the strengths that, you know, we see, the things that people applaud albums like Snakes and Arrows and Clockwork Angels for, the groundwork is definitely very laid here, because even with, you know, limited synthesizer technology and, you know, they still want to keep to a rock band, they can still create such a vast soundscape, and I think they do such a great job with that in this chorus. Yeah. So moving out of this, there's the second verse. It's not a matter of mercy, it's not a matter of laws. Plenty of people will kill you for some fanatical cause. It's not a matter of conscience, a search for probable cause. It's just a matter of instinct, a matter of fatal flaws. No reward for resistance, no assistance, no applause. So, Paul, you want to take the second verse?
Absolutely. Okay, so thinking the whole thing as a system of checks and balances. Example being, I come from a criminal justice background, work-wise. So going line by line, as the soundscape, the story has been told. Now we're talking about the breakdown. Now we're talking about when instinct has come through. So line by line, it's not a matter of mercy. In other words, no logic, mercy being no logic, just compassion. It's not a matter of laws, objective rules agreed upon as far as laws go. Plenty of people will kill you for some fanatical cause. Without those first two, laws or mercy, we swing way too hard into the destructive side of instinct. It overpowers, that passion comes through, and that's all there is. There's no system of check and balance anymore. It's not a matter of conscience, just doing what the individual in this case would feel is just in their mind with no system to apply it to. A search for probable cause being the unit of measurement that we apply. Do we apply the process here or not? That's out the window lyrically. It's just a matter of instinct, a matter of fatal flaws. There's no more objectivity, only extreme passions. So no reward for resistance. In other words, there's no instant gratification if you resist the instinct. So you're just doing what that person or that mindset does what it wants. There's no reward in holding back. The only gain of instant gratification is tossing the rules out the window and doing, you know, pulling a falling down Michael Douglas approach, for example. No assistance, no applause. In other words, it's self-serving. It serves no other person or no other cause except to feed that primal instinct only. By then, the system is broken down. So that's how I view that. And lock and key being the only thing that was keeping it in place. Once that goes away, once you can't keep it under lock and key anymore, that's what you're left with.
Yeah, I really like the legal perspective you took from it, and especially like seeing the lock and key as the check and balances. Going back to what I said earlier in the discussion with, you know, the idea of what society is. It's not a matter of mercy, it's not a matter of laws, which are two very strong components of, modern society. We have like a justice system, and some, I'm not going to get into all that, but providing mercy, I guess, is giving people the time to atone for their crimes and stuff, instead of like old societies where it's like, oh, you touch that person, I'm going to cut your hands off. There's like whatever. Going into mercy and laws, those are things that keep everything in balance in society.
Elements.
But exactly, yeah. But moving past that, it's not a matter of mercy, it's not a matter of laws. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in today's world that is discordant with society and what people would consider to be like traditional human behavior. A lot of really awful things, and that's kind of what this leads into. Plenty of people will kill you for some fanatical cause, especially like today you see with mass shootings, whatever. People have their own drives behind it. A lot of them seem nonsensical, but to them it's a very important thing to them, which I'm never trying to justify any sort of violent act like
that frame that they're in
but
at that time.
Exactly, yeah. To them it's it's a genuine cause. But moving out of that, it's like I really enjoy like thinking about society in a lot of different ways, and the song is it gives you a lot of different perspectives on that. Very, very thought-provoking second verse here from Neil. So moving on, we have another chorus section. I don't want to face the killer instinct, face it in you or me, so we keep it under lock and key. I don't want to face the killer instinct, face it in you or me, so we keep it under lock and key, lock and key. Repeating that second back half of the first chorus twice over. Once again, Rush doing a great job of, building a soundscape, as I already said before. Definitely now hammering in like the main point of the killer instinct, the lock and key. As we've seen, in the previous verse with, some people will kill you for some fanatical cause. It's by this point, it's basically talking all about, animalistic urges, at least in my perspective. And how people will be driven to the absolute edge of traditional society, and just give in and just like full go at whatever they believe in. And once again, the like going full go with this section of the music, they're still keeping up a very strong just beat with it. We didn't really mention it in the second verse, but it has some pretty nutty, drum and bass interplay between it. And also has also had my favorite moment in the music video where Getty's doing his best Les Claypool impression, his legs going up and down like that. If, go watch the music video if you haven't, it's hysterical. But, it brings it back. It really brings in the main core focus of the song. And I think the music does a great job of kind of honing in on that section. So coming out of that second chorus, we have a very brief guitar solo. So Alex, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, the funny thing about that is that a lot of the action in that solo takes place in like, 4 measures. So you could sort of say, oh, that is pretty short. But then when you sort of stretch it back and back, it really becomes more like a 12 bar, 16 bar solo, because he begins with those chords and the heavy vibrato with the bar. So very 80s, infused there at that point. Gets into a little bit of a pentatonic riff, kind of for the second sort of section, second group of 4 measures. Goes high at that point, breaks out some 16th notes, even some, 16th groups that are a little faster. The song's in G minor, basically. It's not a common key for most rock songs. So, you could, to me, and this is what I was saying throughout Power Windows, that to me, this is another example of, Lifeson's put in the box, so to speak, not to be too typical, saying pentatonic and stuff for any guitar players out there, but he's kind of put in the synthesizer box where it's like, all right, we're doing this key signature that's not as friendly for most guitar players, what do I do? And he comes up with a solo that's incredibly interesting as far as the build up, and then a blast of notes at the end just to come right out of it back into another chorus. So that's my take.
Yeah.
Maybe a
I
hot
think
take, maybe not a take.
I think his guitar solo is really, really great. There's a lot of different parts to it, and I think that's a very big strength of Alex.
Yeah.
And speaking to not only his solos, but his entire identity of a guitar player.
Yeah.
Very varied, but can still like really bring a very powerful solo to anything. I would also like to highlight Geddy's bass work in this section. He does a really great job of locking in with Neil and providing really interesting counter melodies to Alex's solo, especially when it transitions back into the chorus, which it's just another double chorus, but it's kind of interesting. Geddy used a 5-string bass on this song, and at least to my ear, it's been a while since I've like critically listened to the song and have been able to decipher notes. Like, it's been a while since I've been able to like pick that out in songs. There's, as far as I'm aware of, there's not a ton of action on the low B. But the main reason Geddy said that he used a 5-string on this song, this is a quote from him. I find that the low string really means more today because we're living in a world of synthesizers that go lower than basses ever went before.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting, thinking about, when Geddy would play bass and keys live using the pedals and, whatever else he was using. There's a lot of contention between bass players and keys players, to the point where, there's all these posts on the internet of people have their keyboards laid out and then a big thing of tape over the bottom octaves on it where it says "Stay away, we have a bass player."
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of talk between Alex having to deal with the synthesizers and stuff, which was a very real issue that he had, but even a bass player competing with himself in the keys section. I think it's a really interesting dynamic, and I think that it's kind of interesting for this song only in their discography. It's the like singular example of it, where Geddy adopted a 5-string wall bass to experiment with that, and we didn't ever see a Geddy use a 5-string ever again after that. And if I'm not mistaken, in live videos he just used a 4-string. And I think it was just I can't remember what it was tuned down to. I think it was just tuned down to E flat, I'm pretty sure. That's that might just be me like looking on forums and stuff trying to figure out ways how to play it on a 4-string. But he doesn't really go all the way down. And I just I think that's interesting. You have all that extra space, but you keep it confined to where you are. It's very tempting as a bass player with a low B to like dong, dong, dong all the time and write music around that low B. But Geddy is able to keep it contained, use it when he needs to, and use it in a way that services the song very, very well.
Doesn't give it the instinct.
Yeah, there you go. The instinct of all bass players. It's very tempting to slap the low E, but when you get a B, man. That's why I stopped playing 5 strings. So coming out of the guitar solo, we have another chorus. Starting to bring the song to a very strong close. And then there's this little tag at the end. We don't want to be victims. On that, we all agree. So we lock up the killer instincts and throw away the key. So, Paul, you want to ride this out, this last section?
Yeah. Kind of tying in that with, okay, we've had this strong story, this strong soundscape we've talked about all along, where the solos and then everything comes to a head. And then it's like a postscript. We don't, after we've hit all these points and busted through this, it's sort of like as an afterthought, but still worth mentioning. We don't want to be victims. On that, we all agree. So we lock up the killer instinct and throw away the key. We want to try and be civilized. You've just seen, or we've just presented to you our version of what can happen when that happens, or what the results of it are. So this is why. It's that sort of just that punch in. And I tie it into kind of like with the video, the music video that it has, and the live version, the only live version they did on Show of Hand.
Little skippiness here. Oh,
Oh.
Paul was. Oh wait, okay, he's back.
I froze.
There
So-
we go.
So the images that they show and the clips they show from the live version of the video are from a 1932 Sam Bischoff movie called The Last Mile. The entire movie takes place on death row, and just for the start of the live version, they actually cut it for the video. There's an interaction between the guards and three prisoners. Prisoner number one is named Berg. He's the one who's about to die. And he says, he sings My Blue Heaven, a couple lines from the song My Blue Heaven, as a prayer. To give you some context, he had been asking, just give me one more minute. I've heard that like people ask for one more minute when they find out they're going to die. Well, he gets it in the movie. The door on the way to the death chamber doesn't open, the lock stick. So he gets what he asked for, but shows no appreciation for it. In the meantime, the second prisoner they show is his character's name is Killer, nickname Killer Mears. And he's the one who's always defiant and shows that killer instinct throughout the entire film, yelling at the guards, taking over. There ends up being a riot on the block. He runs all that. So he represents that killer instinct. And then the one person who yells right before the song starts is the main character. His name is Walters. And he's actually innocent. He's an innocent man on death row. And as they come to get Berg, he goes up, and this is the first time he makes his voice heard. And he says, you can't do it. You can't take him. This is wrong. And the guards are like, step back. We're doing our thing. And I don't want to spoil the ending of a 90-year-old.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking of getting into spoilers here.
I know. That's actually in the first 10 minutes, what I just described.
Yeah.
So that, yeah, I'm actually going to avoid spoiling it. It is available on YouTube. You can watch it. I do recommend it. Even though it's 9 years old and some things obviously are dated,
Yeah.
it ties in very well. And I am going to avoid spoiling the end, but it does tie in with the song very well. I am going to cut that at that point. But they use the imagery from it, and especially the lines of dialogue that they do show off a show of hands perfectly fits. Like I said, I'm going to avoid spoilers, but trust me, it's worth a watch, and it does fit. If you like this song, watch that movie.
Well, there's that intensity, and obviously it's also on YouTube as far as the Laserdisc version of, and just the intensity coming off of that movie, the way the first G sharp minor chord hits, because I mean you can listen to the album, it's like, yeah, that's a cool song, then you hear that live version, it's like, ooh, just like a real, it really grabs.
Yeah. Love that mix. Oh.
I think that's one really great strength of the live version, which unfortunately, the version that's available on, that you would get on CD, that's on streaming services, and even the DVD version of it that I have sitting outside of my dorm, it's, it doesn't include Lock and Key, which is really unfortunate because it was one of the best songs that they played on that tour. So if you haven't checked that live version out, look it up on YouTube. If you have a Laserdisc player, A, God bless you, and B, please check that out. It's so good.
Alex's background vocals.
Oh yeah, they do. It's such a great job. I really wish that fingers crossed for a Hold Your Fire anniversary, they remaster that, put out that whole concert. They have the ability to do that. But yeah, it's really cool thinking about it in tying with that movie. Just another great example of Rush like theatrics. I think there's a couple of songs from Grace Under Pressure. I think I might be remembering this wrong. Maybe Kid Gloves had something similar to that, or I may be thinking of another song from that tour. Maybe not Kid Gloves. But for sure, like Test for Echo. On the Test for Echo tour, they have like the little like intro to it where it's like 5, 4, 3, 2, da-na-na-na. It's just a real testament to Rush as not only, as we talked about, as composers of the music, but being able to really put that through with the theatrics of like, not only concerts, but like music videos and the lyric videos they would put out for Clockwork Angels, whatever else.
Their immersive experiences, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really great. And it's, it's unfortunate. There's a lot of people that didn't get to see Rush live, me included, but, that's why I'm glad we have like live DVDs and, videos of those concerts. So we can still somewhat experience that. Definitely wish they played this on more tours. I wish we could do favorite live versions for this, because I feel like this song deserved so many more appearances later on. But as you said, it only showed up on the Hold Your Fire tour. But yeah, any closing thoughts for you guys on this song?
This is, I think, a perfect example of Neil expressing his libertarian nature, as far as looking at what he might have gotten from someone like Ayn Rand as a 20-something, to the point of having lived a longer life, into his 30s at that point. And for those of us who are out of our 30s and 40s, it's the sort of thing where it's kind of like, oh yeah, longer life, but the fact that some of the don't want to silence a desperate voice, or for the sake of security, balance of the freedom of the person, the pure nature of the human, but we have to live in a civilization here. And that's where, I suppose, for him, and I obviously I can't speak for him, and it's absolutely a crying shame that we wouldn't get to hear him say this in an interview, but the idea that just that aspect of how does Neil, the libertarian, or the one-time libertarian, look at and balance out the human and the society, because we have to have a society. Just, once again, just my thoughts. Muted.
Oop. Having a couple of technical issues with this episode. Hope that doesn't botch the recording. Well, what did you guys think? Lock and Key. This is a really, really great song from a great album that I think you guys should all listen to. Don't forget to like and subscribe, ring the bell, so you know when not only more episodes of Rush Roundtable are coming out, but our other shows like Rush Deep Dive, Rye Guys, everything else we got on the channel. Leave a comment down below. What did you guys think of Lock and Key? Any other comments and criticisms that you have about this song, leave them down below. I love reading them. And with that, thank you guys so much for watching. Have a good one.